Have you ever noticed that your team never walks into your office and says, "Hey, I don't trust you anymore"? That conversation almost never happens. Instead, they stop volunteering ideas, they stop asking questions, they stop disagreeing. Meetings become quieter, feedback becomes shorter, innovation is non existent, and people start doing exactly what you ask and nothing more. Think about all the ideas you're missing out on. And if you're not paying attention, you might mistake all that for alignment, but it's not. It's distance. And what's happening is that trust is slowly breaking, and it rarely breaks loudly. It erodes quietly, one interaction at a time, one broken commitment at a time, one avoided conversation at a time, one defensive response at a time. And by the time most leaders recognize it, that trust is gone, and their team has been grieving the loss of the professional relationship for weeks, and you're just now noticing. Leadership isn't about choosing between people and performance. It's about mastering both. Welcome to Leadership in Real Life. I'm H-Monét, and every week I'll give you practical strategies to help you lead with confidence, clarity, and impact. Now let's get into it. Now, trust is one of those words we hear all the time. Every organization says they want it. Every leader says it's important. And every team says they need more of it. But I've wondered, especially when talking to leaders who say they want to establish trust on their team, is if trust is so important, why do so many leaders accidentally damage it without even realizing it? One of the biggest mistakes I see leaders make is assuming trust disappears because of one big event, one big blow up. They think trust is lost because someone gets yelled at in a meeting, or because a difficult conversation went poorly, or because a leader made one bad decision. And while those moments absolutely do matter, that's usually not how trust breaks. It doesn't usually collapse overnight. It slowly wears away through patterns, small moments, repeated behaviors, the little interactions we don't think about much because by themselves they don't seem like a big deal. Maybe you ask for honest feedback, but every time someone gives it, you explain why they're wrong. Or maybe you tell your team your door is always open, but when people walk through it, you're distracted by your phone or your email, or you're rushing to the next meeting. Maybe you promise to follow up and life gets busy, leadership gets busy, and you never circle back. None of those moments feel catastrophic, but they have the power to hurt your leadership. But leadership isn't experienced in those isolated moments. It's experienced through patterns, and people are always asking themselves one question: can I predict who I'm going to get when I interact with this leader? Can I trust they'll listen? Can I trust they'll be fair? Can I trust they'll follow through? Can I trust they'll tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable? That's what builds trust, if they're able to answer those questions with a yes. Because trust isn't built through these big performative leadership actions like an inspirational speech or an appreciation initiative. Those, no. It's built by what you consistently do on any ordinary day. It's built in your one-on-ones. It's built in how you respond when someone makes a mistake. It's built in whether people leave conversations feeling respected, even when they receive difficult feedback. I think one of the greatest misconceptions in leadership is believing trust is something people give you just because of your title. And it is not. Trust is something your leadership earns over time. And every interaction is either making a deposit or making a withdrawal in your trust. The beautiful thing is that trust doesn't require perfection. Your team isn't looking for a perfect leader. They're looking for a leader who's authentic, who's consistent, who's willing to own mistakes, who's clear about expectations, and who's courageous enough to have those hard conversations that leadership requires. And then compassionate enough to have them well. See, trust isn't just another leadership skill. It's the foundation that every other leadership skill stands on. And if that foundation begins to crack, everything built on top of it becomes harder to sustain. So now let's talk about what this looks like in leadership in real life. Have you ever had someone on your team suddenly resign and you found yourself thinking, I had no idea they were looking to leave? Or maybe someone finally shared feedback with you that caught you completely off guard. They said they didn't feel heard, or they weren't sure they could be honest with you, or they felt like their ideas didn't matter. And your immediate reaction was, why didn't you tell me? Has it ever happened to you? Well, what I've learned over the years is most people don't stop trusting a leader in one moment. They stop trusting after a series of moments. And it doesn't usually disappear because of one big decision. It disappears because of repeated experiences. Here's an example. A team member who comes to you with an idea. You're in the middle of answering emails and you say, yeah, come on in. Go ahead. Tell me about it. And then they're talking. But as they're talking, you're typing. You nod a few times. You say, that's interesting. And then you wrap the conversation up and move on to the next agenda item. And you didn't mean to dismiss them. You were busy. And then a week later, they bring in another concern to you. This time, you're rushing to another meeting. So you're walking down the hallway and then you're listening to them, not really responding. And then you respond with, can we circle back on this later? And then guess what? Later never comes. And then during a staff meeting, there's a disagreement with the decision. And without realizing it, when someone shares their disagreement with the decision, you immediately become defensive. You start explaining why your decision makes sense and you shut them down, but you didn't really mean to. You were just trying to provide context, but that's not how they experienced it. Now, fast forward a few weeks, you ask the team, does anyone have any thoughts? And guess what? No one volunteers their thoughts. No one pushes your thinking. No one raises concerns. And you leave the meeting believing everyone agrees. But agreement is not what happened. Adaptation to your behaviors happened. Your team adapted to your dismissiveness. And it wasn't because you never told them to adapt to your tendency to be dismissive, because you're always multitasking. Your behaviors taught them that they need to adapt to your dismissiveness. They learned it's easier to just not say anything, or it's probably not even worth bringing up, or they've already made up in their mind what it's going to be, so it doesn't matter what I think, or they're too busy. And what makes this tricky for the leader is that none of those lessons that your team learned from you were not really intentional. As leaders, we rarely wake up thinking, I hope my team doesn't trust me today. That's not who most of us are. Most leaders genuinely care about their people. Most leaders want honest feedback. Most leaders want collaboration, but good intentions don't automatically create trusting environments. Our behaviors create those trusting environments. Our consistency creates those trusting environments, and our responses create those trusting environments. Your team is constantly interpreting your leadership. They're asking questions you may never hear out loud. They are asking themselves questions like, is it safe to tell the truth here? Will my leader really listen? Can I admit I made a mistake without being embarrassed? And if I disagree, will I still be respected? Those questions are being answered every single day. And it's not by what we say as leaders, but it's by what we repeatedly do. That's why I often tell leaders this. Your culture is built in conversations you barely remember, but your team will never forget. Think about that. The way you respond when someone misses a deadline, the way you react when a mistake is made, the way you receive feedback, the way you handle disagreement. Those moments may seem ordinary to you and just run of the mill in your day, but to the people that are experiencing your leadership, those moments become evidence, and evidence of whether this is a place where trust can grow or a place where silence feels safer. And that's why trust deserves our attention. It's not built through grand gestures. I repeat, trust is not built through those grand performative gestures. It's built through everyday leadership moments, the ordinary ones, the seemingly insignificant ones, the moments where your team quietly decides, I can trust this leader. Or they decide, I'm just going to keep my feedback to myself. And the truth is that those quiet decisions shape your culture more than any beautiful mission statement ever will. So if trust isn't built through one big moment, then how is it built? And I think a lot of leaders answer that question by saying, I just need my team to like me. If they like me, they'll trust me. And y'all, that is not the move. Trust isn't built because people always like your decisions. Trust is built because people understand your leadership. They know what to expect from you. They know you'll tell them the truth. They know you'll listen before you react. They know your values don't change depending on whoever else is in the room. And they know you'll own your mistakes just as quickly as you expect them to do. So in other words, you're #consistent. And I think consistency is one of the most underrated leadership behaviors there is, because consistency communicates safety. When your team knows how you'll respond, they're more willing to be honest. They know that any mistakes will turn into coaching conversations instead of like public embarrassment in front of others. And then they're more willing to take risks. When they know disagreement won't damage the relationship, they're more willing to challenge ideas that could make the team better. That's when trust begins to grow. One of the questions I always ask leaders is, who do people become when you're around, when you walk in the room? Think about that for a second. Do people become more confident, or do they become more cautious? Do they become more curious, or do they become more quiet? Do they become more innovative, or are they more concerned about getting everything exactly right because they don't want to get in trouble? And do know that your leadership creates the environment for all that, whether you intended to or not. And the environment you create determines the behaviors your leadership team repeats. So if people don't feel safe, they're going to protect themselves, which can get really toxic real fast. If they feel safe, they're going to contribute. That's why I often say fear creates compliance, trust creates commitment. Compliance says, I'll do what you ask because I don't want to get in trouble. Commitment says, I believe in where we're going and I want to do whatever I can to help us get there. Those are two completely different cultures. One depends on the leader being present. The other continues even when the leader leaves the room. And that's what we want as leaders. And if we're honest, I think too many of us have mistaken the quiet teams for the healthy teams. We've mistaken agreement for alignment. We've mistaken compliance for commitment. We've mistaken silence for trust. But silence doesn't always mean people agree. And trust and believe, people are having a meeting after the meeting. That silence means they've stopped believing their voice will make a difference. That silence means they're protecting themselves. And then sometimes that silence means they've already decided that it's easier to just keep their comments to themselves rather than risk being dismissed. And as leaders, that should stop us in our tracks, because the goal isn't to build a team that's afraid to speak. You don't want your team to have a meeting after the meeting where they go and talk about what they dislike with what you all talked about in the meeting after the fact, and you have no idea that they have these concerns. That's not what you want. The goal is to build a team that trusts each other well enough to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's especially when it matters. And that's the kind of culture that balanced leadership is designed to create. It's a culture where empathy and accountability aren't competing priorities. A culture where empathy and accountability aren't competing priorities. They're partners. Because empathy without accountability is going to create chaos and confusion and low expectations. Accountability without empathy creates fear. But when you intentionally balance both, you create something much more powerful. You create an environment where people know they're valued, challenged, supported, and expected to grow. And that's the kind of trust that doesn't just improve relationships, it improves your outcomes. It transforms people's performance. Because people will always do their best work in environments where they both feel safe enough to be honest and challenged enough to become better. That's the kind of leader I want to be. And I have a feeling that's the kind of leader you want to be too. If every interaction is either making a deposit or a withdrawal into trust, then what kinds of deposits should we be making? Because we should be depositing into our trust. And I want to share 5 trust deposits that I believe every leader should practice consistently. And they aren't complicated, but they're often overlooked. So here we go. The first trust deposit is this: do what you say you're going to do. It sounds simple, but trust grows every time your actions match your words. If you tell your team you're going to follow up, follow up. If you promise feedback by Friday, deliver it by Friday. If you tell someone you'll advocate for them, do it and let them know what happened. People don't expect perfection. I say that again. People don't expect perfection, but they do pay attention to your consistency. The second trust deposit is respond instead of react. I want you to think about the last time someone brought you bad news, or they admitted that they made a mistake in their work, or they challenged one of your decisions. What did your face communicate before your words ever did? Nonverbal communication is powerful. And as a leader, you must know that your emotional responses teach your team whether honesty is safe. If every mistake is met with frustration, people will learn to hide their mistakes. If every disagreement is met with defensiveness, people are going to learn to stay quiet. They're not going to say anything. So sometimes the fastest way to build trust is to pause before you respond. Take a breath, ask another question. I always tell my people, remain curious. Choose curiosity before correction. Now, the third trust deposit is invite the truth and reward it when you hear it. So many leaders say, my door is always open. But when that happens, what do people experience when they actually walk through it? Do they leave feeling heard, or do they leave wishing that they stayed silent? If you ask for honest feedback, don't punish honesty when it shows up. Thank people for telling you the truth, even when it's hard to hear and uncomfortable. Especially when it's hard to hear and uncomfortable. Because if people risk their courage to tell you the truth and your response makes them regret it, they probably won't ever take that risk again. The fourth trust deposit is own your leadership. One of the quickest ways to build credibility is to admit when you've gotten something wrong. I had to do it as a principal. There were times where I made decisions with the best intentions and then later realized I missed the mark. And then I had to go back to myself and say, you know what? That wasn't the best choice. I got that wrong. And did it make me look weak? Absolutely not. It actually made me look human. And your team doesn't lose respect because you admit mistakes. They lose respect when you pretend those mistakes never even happened. I actually built trust in those moments. That humility strengthens the trust. The defensiveness to always feel like you got to get it right harms it. And the fifth trust deposit is to balance empathy with accountability. And y'all know I couldn't finish this episode without talking about balanced leadership. Y'all know balanced leadership is the heartbeat of everything I believe. And trust doesn't grow because leaders are nice. And it doesn't grow because leaders are tough. It grows because leaders are both caring and clear. They care enough to understand the people, and they care enough to hold people accountable. They don't lower expectations. They don't ignore poor performance, but they also don't sacrifice people's dignity in the process. That's balanced leadership. It's saying, I believe you enough. I believe in you enough to support you. I believe in you enough to challenge you. Think about how different that feels. Instead of accountability feeling like punishment, it becomes an investment. Instead of feedback feeling like criticism, it feels like coaching and development. Instead of difficult conversations damaging relationships, they strengthen them. Because people leave knowing my leader wants me to succeed and do well and be well. When leaders consistently make those kind of trust deposits, something begins to shift. The meetings become more honest. The feedback becomes more frequent. People speak up earlier. Problems get solved faster. Innovation increases and collaboration feels easier. That's just it. It feels easier. And it isn't because the work became easier, but it's because trust strengthened the collaboration and the partnership in the work. And so that's why I don't think trust is some soft leadership concept. It's one of the highest performing leadership strategies that there is. When trust goes up, communication gets better, accountability gets healthier, relationships grow stronger, and ultimately results improve. That's the power of trust and balanced leadership. It's not a feeling. It is actually a leadership practice. And it's one intentional interaction at a time. That's how it's built. So let me leave you with one final thought. Remember how we started today's conversation? I said, your team probably isn't going to walk into your office and tell you that trust is broken. They're not going to send you an email that says, I've decided I don't trust your leadership anymore. It almost never happens that way. Instead, trust quietly shows up in things people stop doing. As leaders, that's hard to hear, but it's also incredibly empowering. Because if trust can be lost through small, consistent behaviors, it can also be rebuilt through small, consistent behaviors. One conversation, one apology, one fulfilled commitment, one moment of choosing curiosity over getting defensive, one decision to listen a little longer before responding, one act of following through. All of that can help. Those moments matter more than you realize. You don't rebuild trust with one grand speech or performative gesture. You rebuild it by showing people over and over again that your leadership is worthy of their confidence. And that takes time. It also takes humility and consistency and courage. But trust, as leaders are the same person behind closed doors that we are in front of the team, that trust is going to show up. Trust building asks us to lead with conviction without losing compassion. It asks us to hold people accountable without stripping away their dignity. And that's not always easy, but the work is definitely worth it. So the question I'd love for you to sit with this week is, when people leave an interaction with me, do they trust me more or a little less? Leadership isn't measured only by the results you produce. It's measured by the experience people have while producing those results with you. And that's why I believe trust is leadership infrastructure. It's important infrastructure. Everything else you want to build, whether that's accountability, innovation, collaboration, engagement, increased performance, stands on the foundation of trust. So this week, don't focus on becoming a more impressive leader. Focus on becoming a more trustworthy leader. People rarely remember every presentation you gave, every meeting you led, or every strategy you introduced, but they do remember how your leadership made them feel. They'll remember whether they felt seen, whether they felt heard, or whether they felt respected versus dismissed. And that's so important. And in the end, that's the kind of leadership people will never forget, those that empowered them to do well. And if today's episode challenged you, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and tell me, what's one trust deposit you're going to make this week? I read every message, and I love hearing how these conversations are showing up in your real life leadership. And if this episode made you think of another leader, someone who's building a team, they're leading a school, managing a department, or simply trying to become a better leader, share this episode with them. Trust isn't built by one leader working alone. It's built when more leaders commit to creating cultures where people feel seen and safe enough to contribute, courageous enough to grow, and supported enough to thrive. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me. And if you're enjoying leadership in real life, make sure you are subscribed so you never miss a conversation. And until next time, I want you to remember, leadership isn't about choosing between people and performance. The strongest leaders know how to protect both. Lead with empathy, lead with accountability, and let's keep building the kind of trust that outlasts your title. I'll see you next week.